Welcome to our first in a while Finance and Budget Committee meeting, Thursday, June 5th. First, we will have a roll call. Who's doing that? Please do.
Okay, Renee Roth,
Here.
Clay Creasy,
Here.
Kim Mang, not here, Andy Gilman,
Here.
Steve Olson, Ben Harvey,
Present.
Christy Billings.
Present.
Everyone's here except Kim Mang.
Thank you very much. And if you would, please stand if you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I know there's one addition I'd like to add in the agenda, and that is a swearing in by our, you're gonna come up, right? Okay, perfect. And if that, any other changes to the agenda before we begin?
We go around here.
Not that I'm aware of, Mayor.
Okay. Oh, good, thank you. Oh, you came around, wonderful. Let's start with what we need to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This,
Have
the
to read
execution,
into this or anything?
I'm sorry.
Do you
Oh,
want us
good.
to read into
Need
this?
to be close
On
to
a
the
sound
microphone so
system?
it's on
Yeah.
the record.
Renee, you have to hit your mark. This is theater. Stand on your mark.
Okay. The execution of this oath is required by Article 20, Section 3 of the Constitution of the State of California. I'll ask you to repeat after me, except when I say state your name, then state your name. I, state your name. Oh,
I,
yes, hand raised.
I, Clay Creasy,
I, Renee Roth,
Very good. Do solemnly affirm
do
do
solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will
that I
support
will
and
support and
defend
defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
and that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Very good. Congratulations.
Yay. Thank you, Mr. Quilisi.
I know.
Steve, thank you for being here.
Good to see you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
All right, so we will have public communications. I have one card so far, and that is Leslie Roll. Unless you, are you speaking on item number 1, or is this the general public comment, or number 1 first?
No, this is the general public comment.
Please go, please proceed.
Thank you. Here we go. Good afternoon, Budget and Finance Committee members, reconstituted. It's wonderful to see you. Welcome, obviously, to our 2 citizen representatives. I'm Councilmember Leslie Rule, and I'm here to be one of the first to make a request of you. Love my numbers, folks. There is a settlement claim with my name on it pending with the city for $365,753. This is for reimbursement of my documented legal expenses defending a case brought against me for actions taken without fraud, corruption, or actual malice as an elected official. The law is unambiguous. Under California Civil Code 996.4, I am entitled to reimbursement for the cost of my defense, win or lose. As the Finance Committee advising the city, the only fiscally responsible option is to accept the settlement. Because the city can decide on the irresponsible choice, it seems both appropriate and important for this committee to weigh in. Option 1, settle the reimbursement claim. Pay the documented defense costs of $365,753 as the law dictates. The matter is resolved completely. No matter what happens in this case, the city is done. No additional legal costs, no additional requests, no additional discussion, no additional staff time, no additional headaches. Option 2, fight the lawsuit. Under the California Code 996.4, if forced to litigate, the city becomes liable for 1, my defense costs, $365,753, liable for the attorney's fees for pursuing that reimbursement, my attorney's fees, which will be in the neighborhood of that. Be liable for the city's own defense costs for reimbursement lawsuit. In other words, you'll have to defend yourself. And finally, be liable for any additional costs, including but not limited to labor code violations, whistleblower retaliation penalties, and damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress and pain and suffering. And I know none of you doubt that. The city has already spent $150,000 on outside attorneys to analyze my request for reimbursement. You need only imagine the cost for preparing for trial and defending that suit in court. These outside attorneys bill at twice the rate of our staff attorney. I believe part of the Finance Committee's job should be to, that's my warning, should be to act as the voice of financial reason and responsibility when other municipal bodies may not be willing or able. So for that reason, I respectfully request you fulfill your fiduciary duty and recommend the fiscally responsible course of action. Recommend approval of the settlement proposal and to provide full accounting of total staff attorney time and costs over the last 2.5 years. I'm not asking for a political finding or a policy finding. I'm not asking for an evaluation of soft costs, just for the settlement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Roll. Is this a general public comment, Mr. Miley? Yes. Come up, please. Okay, I'll take your card, but thank you, sir. Okay.
In preparing to come here, I looked at the 3 items on the agenda, and I'm really impressed with your willingness and your motivation to deal with these complicated issues. This is going to take some time, especially looking at proposed investment policies, which I did. I glanced at. Also, the issue of amending the current budget. And the last one was to look at and to comment and recommend for the new budget coming up. So this is a joke. I have a catering company bringing you dinner and breakfast because you're going to be here for a long time, and I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miley. I expect at the end of our meeting, we will talk about frequency of our meetings and what we're going to do going forward, because we're not able to stay here too long today because another session is going to be in here later. Anyway, we will move on. How do we know if anybody's online? Norma, are you looking at that? Yes. Thank you. Nobody is? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item number 1, recommendation to review and consider fiscal year 2025-26 proposed investment policy.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm going to ask Ms. Billings to lead the effort in presenting this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody, to our committee.
Hold on, we got it. That's okay, that's okay.
How I should turn this off, that's my problem. Somebody shoot that duck. Yeah, it's my wife.
You just answered it. You just answered the phone.
That's okay.
Okay.
Welcome, everybody, to our committee. I have a PowerPoint prepared, which is up here on both sides. I didn't realize where the screens were. Mm-hmm. So this will take us to our agenda showing that we're going to do the investment policy review, amendments to the 24-25 budget, and in the recommended budget for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2026. So investment policy, it's required to be reviewed annually by the city and adopted. At this point, what staff has done is revamp the existing investment policy to conform to the California Municipal Treasurers Association recommendations. And it is our desire to submit our policy for certification review to see if we would meet that, which means that we are in compliance with what the organization would recommend and what other cities throughout the state of California are putting into their policy and compliance with the government code standards. Because of the short turnover in being able to prepare this policy this year, we didn't make any recommendations to change allowable investments or to change what was the premise of the prior policy, but only to bring it into conformance. So if there are any questions from those of you who have had a chance to read it, I would
Ms. Billings, would you
welcome
like to
those.
take each one of those items separately before we go on to the next piece?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, please.
Mr. Mayor, number one, I did read through it. Thank you, Christie. I have speed read all this material, I have to confess, so, but I'm also somewhat up to speed on the general concepts. So I have a list of 8 suggested edits, and I'll read through them quickly. I have a piece of paper I can give you, so you don't necessarily have to take notes. Matter of fact, I'll pass it over right now. And some of these are relatively...
Mr. Creasy, would you like me to make copies for everybody?
If that's good with you,
Absolutely
that's
fine
with
with
me.
that.
Okay, so... Okay,
Yeah. Oh, no, thanks.
all righty. I'll start and it's
And then I'll come back with the copies while you're going.
perfect, Ben, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey.
And I apologize if some of this is slightly nitpicky, but it is, I've looked at this a number of times. The policy is made up of sections, and so my comments are referenced by section. Section 3, there's a statement with regard to cash flow projections saying that they need to be done, but there's no adjective as to whether they should be diligently produced or otherwise, and other duties in that section have adjectives that speak to the quality, so I think adding the adjective accurate cash projection would be a useful amendment. Section 4 speaks to the amended, or I would suggest amending the return on investments objective, and I've rewritten that paragraph to, I think, make it clear that one of the objectives should be to maximize the interest income or investment income. In other words, create an assertive requirement to efficiently manage all cash resources. The way it reads right now, you could make one investment, and as long as it was good, you were okay, but you have a bunch of cash just sitting there idly, and this paragraph would not address that. So that change would create that new emphasis. Third one, on section 5, the delegation of authority section mentions that the treasurer shall establish written procedures. I would like to see a copy of those procedures. I have no doubt that they'll be fine, but just for completeness, I think it should be something that we would look at in connection with looking at the investment policy. Section 8 starts off with the word ineligible. I think as you read the sentence, you realize that word is not useful in that sentence, so I would just scratch that word. Section 10 talks about investigations that are required to be done by the finance department periodically for pooled investment vehicles. And my question is, have we done an investigation like that on the local agency investment fund or not? Because we have a fair amount of money in there, and it's going forward, I think it would be a very good investment vehicle for us. I want to make sure we're up to speed on what the issues may be with that. Section 13, the next one, within that section, it makes reference to a section 8.0. If you look at the document, there is no section 8.0 per se. There is a section 8, but that actually doesn't seem to be relevant to this comment here, so I would double check whether section 13 needs a little editing. Section 15, I would change the scope of the auditor review to include all cash balances and not just investments, because it is possible to violate the investment policy by keeping excess money in a cash deposit, which would technically not be an investment. So I would amend that requirement for the auditor review slightly to make sure they also look at cash balances. Finally, attachment A, which is the list of allowed investments. We could have probably an extensive discussion as to where you should put your money or should not. I've noticed that you are gradually letting your CD volume run down. You haven't bought any new CDs in the last couple months, which I think is a very good decision because they are complicated to account for, and they also have inferior returns compared to the local agency investment fund. And of course, they have liquidity issues that the local agency investment fund does not have. So I think with regard to looking at that investment, allowable investments, there's some, in addition, such as California agency investments, which typically get priced to be attractive to taxpayers, to California taxpayers. We're not one, so it would be an inferior return to us almost automatically were we to invest in those, which we don't, which is good, but I would take them off the eligible list. So those are my comments with regard to investment policy.
One clarifying question. So your number 2 on your list, where you see section 4, objective, were you suggesting, when I'm looking at the document as submitted, so number 1 was safety, number 2 liquidity, 3 return on investment. You're suggesting what you wrote just to replace the third one, return on investment, but keep the other 2. Okay.
That is correct, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So those are all my comments on the investment
No,
policy.
thanks. What's the feedback on that?
Thank you very much for your review. And at this time, in putting this one together, we kept the language that was already existing because we need to have it adopted by July 1st. There is definitely a lot of room for review of this policy, and I would think that this committee would be a good source to put forth the time to review the policy. And what I would ask of the committee is there anything in this existing policy for now that would preclude the city from adopting it for a July 1st start and then bringing it back as an agenda item to review again? And I do, there are, like the one that references to a section 8 that is a poor reference. I would agree that's something we need to change now. Are there other ones that you would prioritize saying the city should not adopt this at this moment?
I think from a short answer, no. I think you would be fine to adopt as proposed. I certainly would recommend that we would, in an expeditious fashion, review it and make whatever changes seem appropriate for the group.
Thank you for being flexible.
And I have one other question there. So if staff were to take this existing policy, adopt it, and then send it to CMTA for review, where they would also place their comments on things that they felt that we needed to bring forward, would you prefer that we sent it for review and then met as a committee, placing in the recommendations that the committee has, along with recommendations that CMTA has, so we can bridge it all together? Or would you prefer that we get it adopted, bring it back for your review, send it back to the council for adoption, send it to CMTA for review, and then adopt it again?
I see what you're saying.
I think it would kind of depend on whose life you're trying to make easiest. And if you're trying to make your life easiest, then what path you've described would be okay. But CMJ is theoretically going to have to review it twice if you get them the review and then edit it and then submit it again. So, I think none of these changes are earth-shaking. So my recommendation, for what it's worth, is we should make the change we want. That might take a month, something like that, and then submit it for review. Then you know you've got it locked and loaded.
Thank you.
That sounds reasonable to me. Any objections to that? So then what I'm hearing is that we are intending, minus the one possible typo that's listed here under section 13, that we would submit it as is. That's our recommendation to the council. Is that what I'm hearing from everybody?
Mayor,
I
we can
agree
have
with that,
a motion for that maybe in a second?
Let's hear it.
I move to do what the mayor just said.
Okay, I'll second. And am I calling? Who's, how? Please, Ms. Cervantes.
Okay. Of
Yes.
course.
I don't remember exactly where it was, but there's a statement in here about having a benchmark and that the investment portfolio has a benchmark for which it is evaluated. And I don't know that that is publicly disclosed, but I would like to see it be publicly disclosed, what the benchmark is, and if we're meeting that benchmark or not.
Ms. Roth, we do benchmark every month. It's disclosed in our investment report that we give, and we benchmark against the county of
It's in the consent
Ventura.
calendar every
Treasurer's
time in
report.
each of the
In the
council
treasurer's
meetings.
report.
Right, treasurer's report, right.
Oh, okay, all right, so
That's
it
right.
is, all right.
Right.
I didn't know where to look or find it, I guess, so.
So look
In-
there, it's, yeah, and look in that consent and you'll see how it's comparing to Ventura County, et cetera.
Okay,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
One comment on the topic of that benchmark. I believe the section says that the objective is to meet the benchmark. My objective is to exceed the benchmark. So, but I didn't think that was an edit that really merited any serious adjustment.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to forward to the council the approval of the investment policy. Ms. Cervantes?
Renee Roth,
Yes.
Clay Creasy,
Yes.
Kim Mang, not here. Mayor Andy Gilman.
Yes.
Steve Olson,
Yes.
Ben Harvey,
Aye.
Christy Billings.
Aye.
Passes with Kim Mang not present.
Mr. Miley, I don't understand this public comment. Did you not already speak on this item, or is this a card for something else?
This is the card for this item.
Okay. Does it make sense to make it now with the vote already taken?
I can't hear you.
We just took the vote to forward it to the council.
I know, this is about
Okay.
how it works.
Ah,
So I'm looking at attachment A, page 5 of 14, which is the authorized and suitable investments chart showing what's legal and acceptable. I would like to know who or how the percentages are determined for investment. As an example, on the first chart it says, third line, State of California obligations. You can invest up to maximum of 20%. Who decides that? If you go down to the bottom, the last part of the second chart, it says Joint Powers Authority pools up to 60%. If you go 2 up, it says Bank and Credit Union up to 80%. So we have all this money, and how do you decide, who decides where it goes and what percent? That's what I'd like to know.
thank you, Mr. Miley. Yeah, please, if you have an answer.
Mr. Miley, the percentages allowable are set by government code. So that's set by our state legislature. In terms of what the city actually chooses to invest money in, that's determined by the finance staff with the advice from our city treasurer, and also provided with advice from any of the broker dealers that we use.
I hope that helps. Okay, we're going to move on to number 2.
Could I ask one more clarifying
yes, please.
question?
Go ahead.
Where, on page, let's see, first page under scope, item number 2.
Yep.
Where does Measure C funding come in is that included as a special revenue fund?
Yes, Ms. Roth, the Measure C is considered a special revenue fund.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 2, the recommendation to amend the fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, I'm going to defer to Ms. Billings for this item. Thank you.
So the city council adopted the 24-25 budget amendments, and it is under their direction that staff has the authority to do transfers between funds for different types of expenditures. And as part of the budget, probably the easiest one to tackle, I'll start with the encampment grant. So when the budget was adopted, it was not known how much we would spend out of the encampment grant in 24-25. Now here we are coming close to the end of the year. Council has taken action to what we're going to spend, and we can see the projections. So we know about what we're going to spend in 24-25. So in order to get the 25-26 budget correct with our aligned with our forecast, we needed to reduce the amount in 24-25 and then increase the amount in 25-26. So the journal entries that are proposed, or the entries that are proposed, the budget adjustments that are proposed for that are simply to show less spending in 24-25, and then we'll have the expenditures in 25-26 that also align with that grant. The other item, there is a loan between the city and the former RDA, which is now called the successor agency. One of the state requirements of that loan is that 20% be set aside into the housing fund. When I was reviewing the budget, I noticed that that 20% set aside was not shown. I have to admit that I've not been here that long, and in doing a little bit of research, I was like, maybe we don't have to set the 20% aside, maybe we do. I have gotten some advice today which stated that yes, we do need to do the 20% set aside. I will continue to review that before I bring it before the council, but I wanted to let you guys know I'm planning to bring this before the council, and all it's doing is taking 20% of that amount that comes into the general fund and putting it into the successor housing fund, which restricts it for use on certain types of housing projects as stated by state law.
Thank you.
One question, what is it 20% of?
I apologize. The payment in 25-26 is approximately $250,000. So it was a 40, I have the amount on here. The adjustment for 24-25 was $73,000. So in 24-25, the payment was like $360,000. Then in 25-26, it'll only, that's why I've got my years confused. 25-26, it's only $260,000, and then that loan is completely paid off.
So basically, it's just sequestering a portion of the loan payment in advance, I guess, for security purposes. Would that be a sort of generic way to analyze this?
No, redevelopment was formed many years ago, and what the cities were doing was that certain amount of tax increment was going to the redevelopment agency, and then the rest of the tax increment was going to the city. In order for redevelopment agencies to work, they had to create debt. And one of the ways that they created debt was that the city would spend and then the redevelopment agency would reimburse. In 2013, the state of California unwound redevelopment for all cities, not just us. Like they said, we're no longer allowing redevelopment agencies. And these agencies called successor agencies were created. At that point, cities all across the state said, oh my goodness, we have all this money, we've loaned the redevelopment agency, if you unwind this, you know, what are we gonna do? So the state created a statute that said, okay, you can keep up your loans, you have to, everybody had to do a certain interest rate, I believe it was like 3%, that's all you're allowed. But the caveat is you still have to put 20% of loan repayments into a housing fund. So when we get reimbursed, which comes from property taxes, 80% of the payment goes to the general fund, 20% is supposed to go to this housing successor housing agency. So it's not a, it's, and then it restricts its use, because that's a special fund, and it's restricted for certain housing, types of housing projects.
So it's just a statute which directs us to take a certain amount of general fund money and stick it into that special fund. Okay,
Certain, it's,
based on this formula.
and based on the loan. So the city has the loan repayment remaining for the current year that we're in, 24-25, and then one more loan payment in 25-26.
So
And
after
then
next
it's-
year, we don't have to worry about this anymore.
The loan will be
Okay.
repaid.
Sounds fine.
Thank you for the clarification.
But I think the add-on is, we do have this certain amount of money sitting there that the city will eventually need to use for these housing-related purposes.
I bet that won't be a problem.
Been sitting there for a while.
Any other questions for staff?
So I
Yes,
just,
Ms.
just as a follow-up to that, do we know how much money is in that fund? That housing
Yes.
successor?
Yes, and maybe that's a good segue. Well, this item that we just discussed requires no action. It was just an informational item. It will come before the council, and because it was finance related, I wanted you to be aware of it. Do we have any questions on these recommendations for the 24-25 budget adjustments?
So could I just ask a question about this transfer? Was this for administrative costs? Is that what it was? I'm just curious what the transfer was to cover.
Ms. Roth, none of us were unfortunately here when the budget was put together in 24-25, so I just know that it wasn't, we've moved all the expenditures that were encampment grant related into the encampment grant fund, but maybe Mr. Harvey has more information.
Well, okay, I think the long and short of it is that it's a little bit of a moving target with the encampment resolution fund and what was eligible for reimbursement, what was not.
Yeah.
I think the biggest confusing part was whether the city was going to go forward or not. And so I think the headline is, we are going to be submitting a revised application to the state that reflects the council direction and will apportion the grant funds that are reimbursable in the manner that I've described at the council meeting, which is, 9.5 for, I don't need to go through all that again, but just consistent with recent council action.
Right, okay, all right.
And
Very, and to your point, very little of the encampment resolution fund is administrative as far as what's reimbursable. I guess unless you consider legal fees to a degree is administrative. It's mostly for services related to the.
like St. Francis Challenge,
Right.
So it'll be nice to see that itemized, which we know is forthcoming, but I have the same questions you're having.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, great, thank you.
No, thank you. Any other questions for staff on item number 2? Any public comments on number 2? Okay. I make a motion that we direct staff to, let me see exactly how you want it said. To review the suggested amendments for fiscal year budget as shown in Exhibit A and forward to the council.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
Renee Roth,
Aye.
Clay Creasy,
Yes.
Kim Mang, not here. Mayor Andy Gilman.
Yes.
Steve Olson. Ben Harvey.
Aye.
Christy Billings.
Aye.
Passed.
Thank you very much. Moving on to 3, finance recommendation to review the City of Ojai 2020, ending year June 30th, 2026 budget, 25-26.
And I apologize, Ms. Roth, I was not trying to make your answer go so long to the Housing Successor Agency, and I overlooked getting you the right answer that you were looking for. But within the budget document on
Oh, okay.
page 17,
It's in there.
yeah, if you're able to turn to page 17, I can show you the way we've laid out the various funds. So going down on the left are all of the funds that the city manages, and you can see that we have the general fund at the top, and the general fund is the fund that's used to pay for sheriff's bills and Parks and Rec, a lot of your staff costs, those types of things come out of the general fund. Then most of these other funds, all these other funds going down to number 192 are what are called special revenue funds. And they are legally restricted for a specific purpose. And an example would be your Measure C, TOT tax that you asked about previously. And also you can see that Housing Successor Agency Fund. So those are your special revenue funds. And then you have your enterprise funds, which are managed more like a business. So your cemetery and your transit. And sometimes even though you would think, well, that's not really, doesn't seem like we're trying to make a business out of a cemetery, it's because it's managed by fees and that there's no taxes involved. So some of it is just accounting way for it to be restricted. But then coming in that first column there where it says audited beginning balance, so you can see that that Housing Successor Agency Fund, and that's a good one to use because it's right on that dotted line, or that line, began with $1.8 million, $1,874,490. But over here, if you look on the right, you can see where it says reclassifying non-spendable fund balance, $1,281,610. And that's because that fund has already spent that money, and that's in receivables. So there are several housing projects that the city has previously accomplished, but those housing projects owe the city back the money at certain time points. Those loans are spelled out in the city's ACFR. Bringing us down to what I like to use as a budgeted number right there, that $666,661 is the amount that would be available for a future project. And I like to convert it on these type of sheets so that if the council says, wow, you know, we have $1.8 million, let's build something, we want to say, well, that is what we have in assets, but some of those aren't liquid, so you can't spend them yet because you're waiting on those loan repayments or whatever the model is. You can only spend the $666,000. And then if you pull that forward to the next page, page 18, you can see that $666,000 starting in the beginning. And then at the very end of the page, you see that transfer in we were just talking about of the $45,000. And then you end up with the $715,668 is your projected number at the end of 25-26. And that exercise goes through for all the funds that the city manages. I call this my one sheet, and I absolutely use this a lot during the year because when the council has a question, I can quickly come back and answer and say, oh, you have you should have approximately $715,000 available if you would like to do X, Y, or Z in that particular fund. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And hopefully it gives you an overview of all the funds and what the city's budget is and how we've put it together and the recommendations for the different funds.
So is this actually going to show the ending balance of revenues that the city will be able to use at some point for additional housing projects, or is additional debt to be repaid from that amount?
Once this last amount in 25-26, once that $45,000 is transferred in, this particular source, this Housing Successor Agency, will only cash it we'll get after that will be when these different projects that we listed up above that are listed in the $1.2 million, as those start repaying, and a lot of them have to do with they're very long loans. But once those become due, then you would have more cash for projects. At this point, that's already been loaned out.
So this will be accumulating, is what you're saying, over time, a
Yes.
balance?
Yes.
Okay.
I do want to ask a question since we're on this item, which is large. My understanding is this is a logistical apart from this committee. There's a commission meeting that's happening at 6, and I believe that they needed 1 hour in between the two. Is that correct? So that puts a limit. I'm going to speculate we're not going to get done. So then we have to decide what we want to do, where we want to go from there. Because I know I have many items. I'm assuming all of us have items to talk about item number 3. So I know at the council, I'll have another opportunity, so I'm happy to hold mine and hear from others, but we may not get through the others in this session here today.
I do have a number of comments, but I've also reduced them to a piece of paper, so I can go through this fairly quickly and
Is that useful to just go person by person and then we'll go through some comments?
And if I could just jump in,
Yeah.
we want to apologize. We understand the time crunch that you all were put in to try to review this in advance of this meeting, and we do appreciate that. It was unfortunate, a byproduct of the creation timing of the committee and the putting together of the budget, and here we are. Going forward, it's not gonna be that way. Well, we have a committee now, and we will be meeting as part of the budget calendar that we put together every year. So we'll have plenty of time to do that. There was a point of me saying this, and I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
you were apologizing for the short time.
What I was going to say is, we are going to be bringing recommendations made from this committee into the council meeting on the 10th. They'll be part of Ms. Billings' oral presentation, so they won't be for nothing. It's not as great as having it embedded within the staff report, but we already had to submit the staff report for Tuesday's meeting, so we'll make sure that the comments here today that we get will be included.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let me just say parenthetically, 48-hour turnaround reminded me of my days with private equity. So I got nostalgic when I realized I had to read that 100-page document and analyze it in that brief time frame.
You're being a good sport.
Oh, well, thank
Thanks
you.
for that.
My wife may have a different opinion, but that's her problem.
'Kay.
On this cover sheet here, let me just mention 7 findings, quote unquote, that I had with regard to my study of this. And I'm very conscious of the fact that we act in an advisory capacity to the city council regarding the city's financial condition. And I say that just sort of remind us of what our real role is. First, the city has basically exited a period where general fund revenue was growing very quickly. And I have a chart behind here which shows that. But from 2015 to 2020, things were pretty slow. And then post-2020, basically coming out of COVID, we had 4 years where it was an oil gusher. Now, this current year that's just ending and the budget for next year strongly indicate that the gusher is behind us. And so you kind of, we have to redouble our efforts to be very frugal, I think, going forward, just to set that stage. Secondly, expenditures over the past 2 years have been growing more swiftly than revenues, so the expenditures have caught up with this revenue surge. I do make a parenthetical comment that I think you may have overstated your TOT revenue by roughly $595,000 because the ratio between TOT and Measure C should always be exactly 2 to 1, and it's not in this budget. And you have a comment in your narrative that said that your TOT, you're holding it flat due to concern about the economy, which I think is a conservative, smart thing to do. But in the numbers I saw, your TOT is up 6.x%, and that's not flat. So when I did the calculation, it's up to you to refine it and get it right. But I think you have to bring down your revenue a little bit because of that. There are a number of items in the draft budget, and believe it or not, I actually typed into an Excel spreadsheet your entire departmental draft budgets. I have 20 pages, single-spaced, and went through every line item and identified who's up how much. One of the problems is you can't really trust the current year budget to be that accurate because there are fairly big variances between budget and closing. But the prior year actuals are got to be pretty good because they're audited. So I looked at the 2-year increase from 23-24 final numbers, which we now have just barely, and then I looked at the budget for the proposed budget, and I said to myself, who's going up by how much? And I have that exhibit in here as well. If I limited the people who were growing by more than 45% over a 2-year period, and admittedly this is a broad brush I'm painting with, that would save $1 million off of the revenue or off of the expenditure forecast. To me, that indicates that if you did, I reminded me of private equity. If a private equity guy were here and said, I'm gonna sit down with every budget cost center manager and look at all your line items, and you have to justify all these increases, my guess is that's the order of magnitude of what you might be able to take out. Now, it's the
Can I
city
use a case in
council's-
point? So when I look at the IT department and you see that there's a large growth in the IT department, that would be the place where we would say, inform us with the narrative, what's the growth about? And if it makes sense, great. If it doesn't, that's a case in point, I think, of what you're saying.
Exactly,
Okay.
yes. Moving on, there are, as far as I can tell, minimal resources in this budget allocated to wildfire. I think there's 2,500 for the, whatever Chris Dench's thing is, I forget, the wildfire people. But in lots of conversations I've had with people, and this is a financial issue because the financial stability of the city is very dependent on it not burning down. I think I could make a financial recommendation that we ought to look at a real quantum increase in allocation of resources to propagate fire control steps within the city. Number 6, we unfortunately have a repetitive financial control problem, which the most recent audit showed. Now we have 3 SDs instead of 1 a year, which had been the pace before that. Bank reconciliations are absolutely the worst of the worst in terms of deficiencies, because that's how money gets stolen, is if you're not keeping an eye on the money. And I don't know whether that was simply a documentation problem or an actually getting it done problem. You know more than I, and the wording of the audit opinion is a little ambiguous. But having said that, it was 30x years ago as a fresh controller that I was told if my bank recs weren't done on a regular basis, I didn't need to come in to work the next day. So that is something that absolutely has to be done, and I would assert that we should have good oversight on that, because it is a financial condition / control issue.
Do you mind if I respond just to the fire mitigation that you talked about?
Certainly.
Yeah. Now, Mr. Harvey, I want to make sure I'm going to get this right. If I look at page 13 of 81, you've got this green chart. And you see we've got our ending fund balance, and then we see what the operating expenses and transfers percentage is, right? So we see that we're at 100, in the projected 25-26, we're at 117%, right? So that's the number that I'm thinking about when I say, as you pointed out, we want to be very conservative, and right now we are going to have a 100% reserve, but that 17% over the 100% gives the number that I wrote, 2,798,000, something like along those lines. I think last year you were calling that something like the delta.
Well, okay, thank you.
Tell me if I'm correct.
No, you're correct. So first of all, the council has the ability to determine how to spend the money. That is absolutely your job.
Right.
You have a large unprogrammed general fund balance. You want to obviously adhere to your reserve policy of 100% of your general fund expenditures so that you don't have a spending problem in the event that there's an issue. But you could do a number of one-time expenditures if the council strategically decided they were important for things like capital improvement programs or other programs that enhance fire hardening or other matters. I mean, I think that's part of what Mr. Creasy is recommending. Yeah. I think he's also suggesting, I skipped ahead, is a tightening of the belt in some areas too, but I think you're both right. There's a narrative that goes along with some of the increases. So for instance, in the city clerk's office, we're bringing on agenda management software, which caused the budget to balloon for this next coming year. But that once that software is implemented, it will reduce again. But this is a council choice, and we could do things like create programs. We could do things like install features in town, warning sirens, etc. Number of things you could decide to do. The confusing part is you're in the midst of your goals and tactics. You're going to adopt a budget before you've finished completing your tactics.
Understood.
Do you want to save the surprise that you and I talked about for later?
Well, no, it's now, but just to say this, I'm thinking that the conservative and disciplined council move would be to take that dollar amount basically and say, here's the money that we have to work with to try, in addition to the tightening you're suggesting, anything like a new program or a new relationship with a vendor to deliver services that we think are a good idea. That's the kind of dollar amount I'm thinking about, is that excess of the 100%, in addition to any savings. So when we think of things like there's not enough fire mitigation in this, or if you said we want to increase the arts grant or something like that, I'm thinking it comes out of that 17% over.
But I think what I was also
Yeah.
getting at, Mayor,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We're going to, when the council finishes its goals and tactics, they're going to kick it back over to our side of the desk and say, okay, come up with a dollar amount for all of these numbers. The mayor had suggested to me in a meeting that we bring that back first to the budget committee. And we have the budget committee look at all these various asks and decide which are worthy and which are not, or which maybe should take the place of something else in the budget, and then bring that back to the council after the budget committee's looked at it.
Well, and my only comment is I agree 110% with your assessment. And I do think that that Delta Fund, if that's what it's called, is there to be used the way the council sees fit. I would argue that fire hardening is possibly the best investment you can possibly make.
I agree.
Because this place is dead on arrival if we have a wildfire.
I totally agree.
People aren't going to be able to live here. They aren't going to be able to rebuild. All the hotels are going to go adios. We'll give it back to the Indians. So it is, I think, one of the very best investments you could possibly make. And I would think big. I would not think little. And I got through taking that test that you have to take, you know, for ethics and all that sort of stuff, conflict of interest. And one of the points they make is you have to remember that public bodies, such as this committee and others, have a duty to the public to be transparent, and various other procedural duties which produce somewhat of an inefficient process compared to if you were just doing it by yourself, didn't have to ask anybody permission. So I'm willing and ready to be tolerant of some of that inefficiency. But having said that, wildfire prevention, I mean, you will be the marshal for every 4th of July parade from now till, end of the century, if you prepare this place for wildfire and then we dodge a bullet because of that.
I'm with you 100%. And I hope what you will see when we get there would be a very robust plan that has long, medium, and short-term pieces. I welcome your feedback on it, too.
I give you my vote in advance.
Yeah,
for that.
okay, good. We'll keep going through your list, or you have a question?
Well, it is one of the council's priorities, if they have their lists that they showed, and I think it's number 6, I'm gonna say, that you had.
Yeah, I think it's 2.
Is it
yeah.
2? Okay, yeah.
That actually order
So-
doesn't matter as much. They're all
Right.
just there for now.
They're
but-
there.
Mhm.
And
That's it.
then, you know, our reserve that we talk about, the money isn't just sitting there ready to grab. Some of it's restricted money that we're saving to spend for a restricted use, isn't that correct?
Yes. Some of the money that the city has is restricted, legally restricted for certain purposes. One example would be that housing successor agency money that we discussed. It can still be invested, but it is restricted to those purposes that it's legally been raised for.
But it is counted toward the reserve, the 100% reserve.
Oh, I apologize. No, that money, I thought you meant all of the funds. The general fund money has a little bit of a restriction on it, but not much. And we took those out right here where we showed the non-spendable. That's the loan being repaid, and a few other items against the city, but it's very minimal in our general fund. It's about $400,000 that's restricted and unspent and not cash.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
that's a good clarification.
And just to speed along, my last comment
Okay,
here.
good.
Some figures in this draft budget package actually do not tie, and Krista, you gave me or Norma, you gave me an edited sheet on one of those. I've included a list in here. I won't bore you by reading them all, but if we are in, typical budget process, you wash it and rewash it to get as much of that gremlin activity out as possible. The bottom line, my advice, were I writing the motion, would be that we revise the draft budget to address data accuracy issues to the extent we can find them, and I've shown a number of them. More importantly, I would challenge departments to economize where possible within the context of sort of a round 2 of budget discipline. And then number 3, I would increase the resources, as we just talked about, to devoted to wildfire hardening. Those would be my sort of takeaway messages to the City Council. Those are my comments on the budget. There's a bunch of really interesting graphs in the back and so on, which you can look at your leisure.
And Mr. Creasy, I want to thank you very much for your thorough review. And we always appreciate the feedback on any inaccuracies. As staff was working to put this together, we had to do a lot manually this year because we are just learning the city's software and the tools. I do want to address the issue about the bank reconciliations. The bank reconciliations are all current, and as the auditors explained to me that their comment from 23-24 was in regard to the lack of documentation. Neither of us were here in 23-24, so I cannot state for certain when those reconciliations were performed, but when I arrived here, all of the bank reconciliations were up to date and reconciled down to, no variance or maybe an immaterial variance here and there. So we have changed that to make sure that we're signing off on the bank reconciliations and making that note so it's available for the future. I also wanted to address the issue of the TOT revenue, and that's a number that is our largest revenue, one of our larger revenues. So of course we looked at it very closely. I do apologize if the variance wasn't caught between Measure C and the general fund. We'll look to address that. But we do note that the 24-25 budget was budgeted very conservatively, and we are going to come in ahead of that budget. So that brought that variance a little bit different to where we were. And also there is a new hotel that's coming on for the city of Ojai. Staff took a very conservative look at that, assuming that the hotel, and we hope it opens much sooner than this, but we wanted to be conservative. So we assumed that the hotel didn't open until like April and provided some revenue to the city for that. So that is why that jumped up a lot more than you might have anticipated otherwise. But we did keep the other hotels that were in flat with what they are expected to produce for this year.
That new open date is, I believe, June 14th now.
According to the newspaper. Yeah.
According to the
Yeah,
newspaper.
well, if I could, just on that topic, we are working closely with the hotel. There is a number of issues we're addressing collaboratively for occupancy that involve the fire department and the building safety department. So we would like it to open this month. It may. We're working with them.
Yeah.
Three years ago, we had the same conversation at one of these meetings about when it was going to open. I swear I
Yeah.
remember it so well.
Well, it's really close. Yes.
I just, on the topic of the TOT thing, I'm aware that you have always, or so far, you've had year-end variances in the net of revenue versus expense, and those variances have been pretty large, frankly, over the last couple of years. The current year, it looks like it's shrinking, but still positive. So I don't think the TOT adjustment that I talked about is necessarily going to sink the ship in any sense. But it's a pretty big glitch that you would want to fix, I think, going forward.
Yeah, thank you.
The other thing I did want to address is in going over the budget, we did not make, other than these that are required for authority to do transfers, we did not make any adjustments or reviews of the 24-25 budget, but rather moved to the 25-26 budget. And I think staff will say that Ben did a very thorough job of making them sing for their supper in their different numbers. We did meet at least 2 or 3 times with each department to go over their numbers. So while there's always room for improvement, they have been looked at pretty closely.
Well, and I think the other thing, there's a couple things that need to be said to that. So last budget, we came to the council and requested that all of the city salaries be brought up to market. They were well below market, and our recruitment and retention efforts reflected that. So it was a sizable increase, but we had folks that were, in some cases, 15, 20% below. This year in the budget, we're recommending, with the exception of my position, which we're not including, a 1.8% CPI across the board. I also have a question, Mr. Creasy. Looking at your chart, the general fund expenditures for 25, I'm wondering, is, the spike that you're showing, is that because of the inclusion of the Cabin Village project and grant monies being spent towards that?
You're talking about for the fiscal year 2025?
Well, I think so. I mean, I'm on the page with the yellow heading, Ojai General Fund History at the bottom. There's a chart that says annual growth rates, and I'm just speculating that might be related. I didn't put together your numbers, so I can't speak to it, but I'm just wondering about the large spike that you're showing, and I'm wondering if that is money being put towards the Cabin Village project, which is considerable, right?
Okay, for 2025, the spike you're talking about is the 47.5%.
Right.
No, that does not include Cabin Village spending.
Okay.
Where Cabin Village spending does show up here, and just for completeness, I have on a pro forma basis for 2026 included the $1 million number that has been recently referenced as the potential long-term spending. I know that won't happen in 2026.
I guess I'm just wondering, I'll ask it more bluntly. I don't know that I understand the 47.5% increase in expenditures. I mean, I would want to look at that more closely, but I'm wondering about that.
The numbers, if you look at the 2024, the third line from the bottom, expenditures, $12,161,000.
No, I understand your chart makes sense, but you put the chart together pulling numbers manually from the documents you had. I'm questioning this, and this, we're all just seeing this now, just like you just recently saw the budget. I think this is a longer discussion. I have some questions on this chart.
We should probably go offline, not waste
Sure,
everybody's
sure,
time, but
sure.
I'd be happy to do that with you.
Good, thank you.
And Mr. Creasy, I did want to answer one of your questions on here with regard to the sheriff's contract. So the sheriff's contract is budgeted to increase by 7%. The 24-25 budgeted amount did not accurately reflect what our contract turned out to be for 24-25. So the 25-26 budget.
So the base is actually lower than what is showing up in the budget for 24-25?
Yes.
I see.
We did not adjust any of the 20.
Okay.
Generally, when I prepare a budget for the next year, I do reduce or adjust the current year budget. But because we had just stepped in and not wanting to adjust everything, we concentrated on preparing just a 25-26 budget that was simple, getting the numbers in, bringing this forward to the council committee and our council workshop, and then for the next meeting, adding in more graphs and some of the information that we're accustomed to seeing in our budget. But we wanted to make sure that we'd looked at the numbers as best we could and got them in here.
That's fine. So in other words, you're going to get a 200,000-ish pickup in your 24-25 sheriff cost center once all the numbers are audited.
It appears so.
But I would also want to jump in and say that money expended towards the sheriff contract is increasing from prior years, for the notable fact that we're operating under council direction to add a motor officer to the contract, which is a considerable expenditure. I think all in it was around $385. Yeah. So
my comment was not qualitative with regard to the logic. It was just the numbers didn't work. So now I know
was
why.
something that I was hoping we would look at in some, not to say stop the contract, but to look at it in detail to say, that's something that people have been asking for years is let's just look at the contract and make sure it makes sense in relation to the valley. And I know I've heard arguments both ways, but it would be worth in some detail to look at again. I had there's a couple little things that could come up. One is Leslie Rule's name is misspelled on the first page. No big deal. Yeah, it'd be page 2 of 81. That's small, just something to fix. And then this is a small but important thing for some. The goal of climate resiliency, they had been asked to change it to mitigation, but that's a remnant from the name before. So you could just change it to mitigation going forward on wherever you find it. And then the other thing, and this is something I sort of brought up before. Nope, and I'm happy to concede the point. When we say that we are going to go below, I'm looking at page 12 of 81 under general fund reserve policy. And if the second paragraph reads, should the reserves fall below the 100% threshold, the city council is required to declare a financial emergency through a resolution. And the only point I was trying to bring up was, and I said this in the council meeting, but I'm just saying it here one more time. We had lived with a 50% reserve for a long time. We had gotten where we had the revenue to adopt a 100% reserve when it was placed in a budget, not as a separate, larger conversation. I favor it. I simply mean to say that if through diligence and a lot of research, if hypothetically we were to come up with a project where we could literally save some money by spending the money now versus another year, like let's say increase the paving project timeline, hypothetically, that's not a fiscal emergency, but it's being financially sound, again, through the right kind of investigation. So I was trying to encourage the council to pause a little at the language, that if we thought there was a good use where we now had an 85% reserve, but it was a really good spend, that's all. Just saying it one more time.
And Mayor, I think one of the things that we talked about, and I also talked to Ms. Billings about, is delivering a revised reserve policy. And we'd start here with this committee for you to weigh in on it, because there are strategic uses for the reserve that might make sense. A grant match, maybe there's a one-time capital improvement project you feel is in the interest of the community, et cetera. Yes, it's important to keep that money there for the rainy day, but you also need to deliver value to your residents. So we plan on bringing that back, and we'll start here with this committee and let you guys give your recommendations before we take it to the council.
Yeah, all good.
Just one thought,
Yes.
Mayor, on that. I have looked at a number of other cities' reserve policies. 100% puts you in the head of the class.
I know that. I looked as well.
And way.
At least there was a study out of UC Riverside, which was the average was 20%.
Yeah, St. Helena, which is a lot like us, and actually where I grew up, 18% is their policy. So
What's the amount?
18.
18.
I'm not arguing for that.
Yeah, no, and me neither. But I think the true academic approach to the reserve policy should be a combination of statistical judgments with regard to the reliability of revenues and the stickiness of expenses.
Fair enough.
And you can do that with a fair amount of diligence and come to an answer that is then pretty reliable long term. I recall how the 100% got picked. It was not out of thin air, but it was, not exactly scientific. It was just, we're there, sounds like a good idea, let's do it. So I agree that there is another chapter waiting to be executed on that, and I think it would be a proper council directive to staff to have the promulgation of reserve policy be somewhat more mathematically, statistically defensible than just, a group got together and thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
I would just like to add that with that, I agree with what Mr. Creasy is saying. One thing that makes Ojai a little unique from some of the other communities is, of course, our visitor-based economy and reliance upon one particular source, which makes us unique. We're in the same, the treasurer will appreciate this, we're in the same company as Mammoth Lakes in some ways, because if the resort is gone in Mammoth Lakes is gone, we're in the same bucket.
I agree with that too. Yep. No, that sounds really good. So just a thought, every place, because I, like Mr. Creasy, I noticed all the places where you saw a large change from last year to this year. So I expect the council to bring that up also. And each one would have a brief narrative around it ready to go. to say, as you just pointed out, their software that's coming out, it's a one-year expense, et cetera.
Add some comments?
Mm-hmm.
I had a 4-page document, but I've dropped it down to 2 pages. So if you wouldn't mind taking a
Yeah.
copy of it.
Great.
And I'll try to go through it quickly.
Mm-hmm. There's copies.
No, I think there's enough,
In color.
7.
Yeah.
So I do want to acknowledge, Christy, that I know you came in very quickly and had to put this together very quickly. So I do appreciate the effort. I know Norma now has been here for 6 months, she said. So we have a relatively new team and a lot to do and a lot of uncomfortable things to have to work through. So I appreciate you stepping into the work. I do think, in terms of clarity, transparency, and long-term planning, I think that we need to do more with the budget, and I think we've got some of the resources to start that process, and I would like to see that happen. I talked to Christy a little bit earlier about the GAN calculations, and we don't have to talk about it, but I just mentioned that briefly right there. There's different ways that you can maybe increase that GAN limitation. There's also, it was difficult for me to go through based on the format because I was expecting to see the revenues and the expenditures by fund because you summarized it beautifully, but then when you go to look for the details and try to match those revenues to expenditures, it was difficult to track. And I wasn't expecting that. The other thing is, in terms, so the comparative format for the 24-25 adopted budget, and then the revised budget, because there have been many revisions to this 24-25 budget, and then the fiscal year 25-26 proposed, would have been great to be able to see that. And that includes transfers in and out, and then use of fund balance for those funds. The other thing I wanted to measure is I was looking closely at the Measure C funds because I noticed in the original or last year's budget they said the TOT Measure C funds included 100% in general fund, but it was confusing because really the general fund only gets 10% and the Measure C fund gets the 5%. And I'm thinking it's a 2/3, 1/3 split, exactly. So it's kind of it should be, in my opinion, it's either you're gonna do it one way or the other, but you say this fund has the 10% and this fund has the 5%. And it should be consistent across all of those funds. The other thing is on Measure C, I was expecting to see allocations based on the voter-approved categories. So for transparency, Measure C was approved for capital projects, code enforcement, climate change mitigation, and fire mitigation, as we've been talking about during meetings. And I would be expecting to see that in terms of the voter-approved expenditures for those items. Where have those expenditures been? And as Clay was saying, we know there has been 0 to none on fire mitigation. There has been quite a bit on climate change mitigation for equipment and energy efficiency upgrades. And also, most of the money is going for the backlog for road improvements. That there was a lot of deferred maintenance for many years, and I acknowledge that completely. But I would like to see going forward that we have more transparency on the Measure C allocation of the expenditures. And if you go to the back side of that document, I give you improved transparency on voter-approved mandates. I give you an example that shows revenues of, and I say this 5% of the TOT, and this is an estimate. And then you've got interest earnings, and then you've got fund balance use that you're transferring in to have total revenues. But then your expenditures go down and show that you've got code enforcement, capital projects, climate change mitigation, fire mitigation, and then a remaining fund balance, if there is a remaining fund balance that is being set aside as a reserve. I just think those are important things for people to be able to see, so we know where is the money going, because right now we see it's a transfer to CIP. And actually, if you go to the Measure C fund on page 55 of the document, for page 55 of the document, it shows salaries and deferred comp and a lot of payroll and personnel kinds of things, but we don't really know what is that for. Is that for roads or public works, or there's no category, so it's hard for me at least to see what it's for. Just one second. And then the other thing is for expenses, so we see salary and benefits for almost 200,000, and then we see 6.7 million going out for transfers out to this fund, that fund, but we have no idea what it's being spent for. So it would be much appreciated if we could get, I know capital improvements does roads, I know the equipment fund does equipment, but it would be nice if we could break it down into those categories or have a footnote that we could go back to and see how the money's actually being allocated. Does that make sense? Do you have comments?
Yes, I was going to point out that on page 70 of the document is the CIP. And at the bottom of that, you'll see the year one revenue.
Uh-huh.
And it shows the Measure C and the spending by category.
Right.
So that would show you that amount that you see being transferred out of Measure C. These are the categories that they're going to. And then for the specific projects within that, like for streets, I know this detail is very small, but it's on there.
I know, it's a lot of back and forth is what I'm saying. When you go
Yes.
to transfer to the street fund, the equipment fund, the transit fund, the general fund, the capital project fund, but we don't see, is this for those four categories? Where do the expenditures break out by categories?
So what Ms. Palmer pointed out at the last council meeting when she proposed the CIP for next year, where the revenue was coming to pay for the project, Measure C was one of the options. So she did list it there. I'm hearing you say it might exist, but you would just like it to be more consolidated so it's easy to grok on one sheet.
It would be,
Yeah.
you can do a footnote and have
Okay.
the Measure C fund have a total for those four categories.
Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying? That would be helpful. That's transparency with voter-approved initiatives that I think has been lacking, and I think it would be helpful. And then the last set of comments having to do with road funds, structural deficits, being able to move out of structural deficits so that you understand your road budget is going to be, $10 million a year for the next, whatever is in Lindsay's budget. She's got a budget for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Where are those revenues going to come from? And learning to be able to put in, it used to come 20% from the general fund. When Measure C passed, you had that 20% that was in the general fund all going now to expenditures within the general fund, and nothing is going to CIP. And then you've got the special fund for Measure C
I think
that all the money's going out of.
I think
So-
what she proposed at the council meeting did show over years where that revenue was coming from. It was listed in the far right column, kind of on the Excel sheet. But what I'm hearing you say is you would like it to be in a way that you can get very quickly. Because it was on her sheet that she proposed.
On Lindsay's.
Yeah.
And she's starting to do it. I'm not criticizing it.
No, I'm just, but I'm hearing you say it sounds like a design question.
In other
So
words,
what I'd like to do is be able to say, what is a 5-year road maintenance plan and what kind of reserves are
So
needed?
if you, like,
so
let me
that
give you an
if we-
example. Page
if-
72 of 81 is one example of what she proposed.
Okay, all right.
Look at that, page 72 of 81. You'll see, for example, the row streets, and you'll see years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going out to 29, 30.
Right,
And then if you go a little further right, you'll see funding source,
right.
and you'll see Measure C as one of the columns.
And it used to be exclusively general fund, is what I'm trying to point
Uh-huh.
out.
Okay,
It used to exclusively be general fund, and then Measure C passed, and it's 100%
okay.
Measure C. So I do see what you're saying there,
Yeah.
though. Yes, that is helpful.
No, good. So just a little time check. So if we have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, that's 6 minutes from now, and I know we have 3 public comments, which let's do hear from these folks. Mr. Akins, you wanted to talk, but I don't have a card, but please come up and talk.
But I gave you a card when I came up.
Oh, you did, you little sneaker. Go ahead.
That's why I was anxiously sitting there as
No, thanks.
public comments got
Please.
avoided. Okay, I'm Brian Akins. I'm here with 2 hats on. One is the Ojai Valley Museum. I've been on the board for 16 years, treasurer for 12 of those, president the other 4. I asked Leslie Rowe when she was there whether she had seen the letter that came from Wendy Barker, our executive director. She said she had. Just a couple things. Since 2015, we received $60,000 in city funding. Over the 10 years, our exhibits have improved content and execution, number of events, activities, such on and on and on. We just keep getting better with the money that we get. 10 years ago, I actually came here. I've actually been going to the budget committee meetings with Mr. Olson for much of those years. I was here when they jumped it pretty out of the pocket from 50% to 100%. I picked myself up off the ground. And then she says, we respectfully request an increase in annual funding from the city for the upcoming fiscal year, raising our funding to $75,000. So 2015, we asked for 60, we got 60. We have not asked for an increase since that time. I checked the increases, inflationary increases have gone up 34.2%. And so we asked, in trying to do the different things we are, for an extra $15,000 to take us up to $75,000.
So, Mr. Akins, that would be page 38 of 81, where
That
we see
would
the
be
60.
page 38 of 81.
Yep, okay.
You're
Thank
correct.
you.
Mhm.
Okay.
So moving 60 to 75 is the proposal.
Yeah, that's our ask.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much for that part. Okay, putting my HPC hat on, looking at that, I talked to our chair. She sent me a text message. You're going to get a little bit of it. Basically, it says that we did put a budget recommendation together. I just verified with Mara and with Sherry and looked at the minutes from our last meeting, indicate that in our last meeting we asked for $20,000 for 2 historic resources report, $10,000 for trail signs that we're doing, $3,000 for education. That came up to $33,000, just amounts that were put in there. 30 seconds to go. If you look on page 43 of 81, Mr. Creasy, I only had 26 hours because I didn't see it until yesterday afternoon. The budget got up at 5:30 this morning to analyze it. So if you look at 43 of 81, you'll see that the HPC is getting $1,000. That's compared to the $20,000 that we got the year before. So again, as part of the HPC, and that doesn't, I'll just close with this, and that doesn't include at all what the ad hoc committee is addressing.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Akins. We got it. Mr. Miley, please.
Hello, I have 2 parts.
Yeah.
In the budget for the 25-26, where would I find money that would be used for the payment for the drivers of the trolley? And I don't believe the drivers get any benefits, but if they did, where would I find that? Okay. But the main thing I want to say is and you know this, there's an elephant in the room, which is the role that tourism plays in funding the city budget. We have the tourism occupancy tax, TOT, but Measure C, unless you know that's funded by TOT, you don't know that. That's like $10 million out of 16. So here are my comments. In our general plan, we have an economic and tourism element, which should receive a lot of emphasis and probably more attention than the plans are that it will get. What do we know about the tourists who come here, repeatedly come here, what they like, what they want, what they do, and what they go away not getting? Specifically, TOT revenue also should be used for fire hardening, 1%, for low-income homeowners, and for those landlords who are low income and have rental units. A percentage should help pay for the homeless programs. I think we could possibly have a huge crisis if Ojai ever becomes touristy, Touristy, which is a tourist trap, and people start staying away. We won't have much money to do anything with. We should spend more time and more of our focus, including money, on making the experience here for tourists a cultural experience. And we also should look at it from the point of view of the residents as to what they get out of the millions of people coming here every year. Also, when El Roller opens up, there's going to be another million probably. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Miley. Mr. Coggin, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, board members. I'll try to make this really quick.
Yeah, sure.
I wasn't going to say anything, but Mayor Gilman, you kind of opened the door when you brought up the re-terminology on the climate resiliency. So the original item, when it was put up on the board, I have a screenshot that Leslie put up there, was called wildfire safety and risk mitigation. Okay, I mentioned this to your illustrious city manager a long time ago, but I know how very, very busy he's been with everything that's going on.
That's a great change.
I can tell you that your tactics fall under two separate categories, and I can give you a definition, or you could just take my word that they really are two separate things. So if it could be relabeled wildfire safety and risk mitigation, that would really be appropriate. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Done.
Mayor, real quick, I just want to point out, transit appears on page 57 of 81. Mr. Miley is correct. Those are part-time employees currently. Council could decide to change those to full-time employees. That does have a larger footprint. That does make them PERSable. There is an impact to that, to the bottom line, that's not consistent with belt tightening. The city does pay for training for any applicant who needs commercial driver training. It's through Gold Coast Transit. We do pay for that 100% for anybody who is interested, and we encourage anybody who wants to do it, who doesn't have a license, to come forward, and we're actively doing that now.
Ms. Cervantes, is anybody online that would like to make a public comment? Thank you. So what do we do with our hard stop here at 5 o'clock?
I might recommend that Mr. Creasy and Ms. Roth were kind enough to give us their comments in writing. We will work to go through that and make sure we understand everything. We'll probably be reaching out to both of you because, as we indicated, we want to bring those forward to the council as part of the oral presentation. Please.
I just want to ask one more question that I didn't get to address. In the past, the city has had different approaches for how they reach out to community service organizations. And in past years, they oftentimes gave them advance notice. I know we haven't had that time yet, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, like the Green Coalition and other public service organization who do a lot of education and outreach have had funding in the past. That has been minimized or cut to zero. So if there's any way to re-look at those community service organization numbers and
Well, if I could just jump in, that's a council policy directive right there. What this council has not done, which this city has done in the past, other cities do, is have a call, if you will, for, call for proposals or and so forth. The council can do that. They have not done that, and that's why we don't have a public notice, hey, the budget's coming, come down and sing for your supper.
Right.
Because the council has not directed us to do that. If they want to, they can, but we deliberately have not put out a notice because the council hasn't told us to do that. And what we don't want to do is open up the budget meeting and have 50 people lined up asking for money because they haven't given us that directive. So that's very deliberate why we have done that.
If I can jump in. So it seemed to me that the process, even though it's a slightly backwards possibly, is to first articulate what the goals are and the tactics for the goals. And then in many of those cases, it's going to be some outside nonprofit partner that's going to take care of those things. So once those goals are articulated, then it would be, and in some cases it's already begun where some people are working on proposals already. You probably know about that. So they understand, and I've expressed it to them, don't feel obliged to have a decision be made by the end of June, because I'm looking at that, especially that sort of delta, to say that is one piece that we can access immediately. So they understand that, and it's that the goals have taken longer than I had hoped to articulate. I hoped we would have had them be more done on Tuesday. So
Yeah.
I hear you 100%. I was there when contractors came, and so it's a little behind that, but I think it's, in a few months, I think we'll be in good shape.
very good. I just wanted to publicly
No, it's good.
add that to the
Very good.
to-do list. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I thought we had, do we still have CDBG funds? There is a line item in here that says CDBG, but is it a
Very,
thing of
very,
the
very,
past?
very minimal. We're a non-entitlement community, so we get very minimal funding, and basically the way that's going with the money trickles from the federal government to the state down to us. I see that basically being a zero item.
It's 246. But it would be that we would basically hire contractors for a service to provide that attaches to a goal, similar to what the chamber had done in the past, for example, and what Help of Ojai does in some part now. So I'm hearing Mr. Harvey say that we're going to take the feedback that we have here. You guys are going to look through it. There might be questions on the details. Thanks for writing it out, and we'll go forward.
Yes.
One additional thing.
Yes.
I know we're out of time.
Yep.
I have sketched out a list of potential future agenda
Oh, yeah, great.
ideas. So I'm just going to hand this out, and
Wonderful. Thank you.
you can digest it at your leisure.
I do want to suggest that we and then we really should leave so that Weston doesn't get upset. When could we meet again? I would want to throw something out. I would say once a quarter on the outside. It could be every other month until we feel we've got some traction, but I want to leave it to you guys. What
I'd
makes
be
sense
in
for you?
favor as frequently as you want, and I would not be opposed to monthly until we hit a pace that feels like we're, in good shape.
I think your reso has a limit number now, I believe. It says something like, I think it's more aligned with quarterly. Council could change that.
I think right now the resolution says once a year, possibly, but once a
I
quarter
think
would
it says
be.
at least once a year. I don't.
Oh, at least
recall
once a
the-
year is great. Yeah, okay. So that sounds like, I'm hearing you say, bring it to the council for now?
No, I think you could, Mr. Creasy's right, you can meet as often as you want. I would say that probably logical, we're out of time, you're right, but
Yep.
Mayor, you're the chair of this body. You can
Yep.
decide to meet, if the members are present, as often as you want.
Mm-hmm. I do like the idea of as we get started, and it's not like I want more meetings. But if we could, at least in this beginning phase, once a month, just for a couple of months to get up to speed, that seems useful, maybe after this budget item. So what about our next meeting in August? Does that seem reasonable? Okay. So we'll schedule for August and then with the intention of setting the next one. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you all for being flexible and on top of it.
Christy wants to send us your PowerPoint that you didn't get to go through. I want to see what you were going to say. Thank you.
You're welcome. And the PowerPoint was very broad and intended to just set a framework, so it wasn't something that we needed to go through. Thank you.
Okay. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.